But Azinma's Iuwa had looked real enough. It was a smooth pebble wrapped in a dirty rag. The man who dug it up was the same Okagbue who was famous in all the clan for his knowledge in these matters. Azinma had not wanted to cooperate with him at first, but that was only to be expected. No Obanje would yield her secrets easily, and most of them never did because they died too young, before they could be asked questions. "Where did you bury your Iuwa?" Okagbue had asked Azinma. She was 9 then and was just recovering from a serious illness. "What is Iuwa?" she asked in return. "You know what it is. You buried it in the ground somewhere so that you can die and return to torment your mother." Azinma looked at her mother, whose eyes, sad and pleading, were fixed on her. "Answer the question at once," roared Okonkwo, who stood beside her. All the family were there, and some of the neighbors too. "Leave her to me," the medicine man told Okonkwo in a cool, confident voice. He turned again to Azinma. "Where did you bury your Iuwa?" "Where they bury children," she replied, and the quiet spectators murmured to themselves. "Come along then and show me the spot," said the medicine man. The crowd set out with Azinma leading the way, and Okagbue following closely behind her. Okonkwo came next, and Akwefi followed him. When she came to the main road, Azinma turned left as if she were going to the stream. "But you said it was where they buried children," asked the medicine man. "No," said Azinma, whose feeling of importance was manifest in her sprightly walk. And that's letting you know that Azinma feels kind of like she's, pretty cool all of a sudden with everybody following her around and giving her all this attention. She sometimes broke into a run and stopped again suddenly. The crowd followed her silently. Women and children returning from the stream with pots of water on their heads wondered what was happening until they saw Okagbue and guessed that it must be something to do with Obanje. And they all knew Akwefi and her daughter very well. When she got to the big udala tree, Azinma turned left into the bush, and the crowd followed her. Because of her size, she made her way through trees and creepers more quickly than her followers. The bush was alive with the tread of feet on dry leaves and sticks and the moving aside of tree branches. Azinma went deeper and deeper, and the crowd went with her. Then suddenly she turned round and began to walk back to the road. Everybody stood to let her pass, and then filed after her. "If you bring us all this way for nothing, I shall beat sense into you," Okonkwo threatened. "I have told you to let her alone. I know how to deal with them," said Okagbue. Azinma led the way back to the road, looked left and right and turned right, and so they arrived home again. "Where did you bury your Iuwa?" asked Okagbue, when Azinma finally stopped outside her father's obi. Okagbue's voice was unchanged. It was quiet and confident. "It is near that orange tree," Azinma said. "And why did you not say so, you wicked daughter of Okalogoli?" Okonkwo swore furiously. The medicine man ignored him. "Come and show me the exact spot," he said quietly to Azinma. "It is here," she said when they got to the tree. "Point at the spot with your finger," said Okagbue. "It is here," said Azinma, touching the ground with her finger. Okonkwo stood by, rumbling like the thunder in the rainy season. "Bring me a hoe," said Okagbue. When Akwefi brought the hoe, he had already put aside his goatskin bag and his big cloth, and was in his underwear. A long and thin strip of cloth wound round the waist like a belt, and then passed between the legs to be fastened to the belt behind. So if you picture kind of like what the sumo wrestlers wear, that's kind of what his underwear looked like, if you wanted to picture this guy in his underwear. He immediately set to work digging a pit where Azinma had indicated. The neighbors sat around watching the pit becoming deeper and deeper. The dark topsoil soon gave way to the bright red earth, with which women scrubbed the floors and walls of huts. Okagbue worked tirelessly and in silence, his back shining with perspiration. Okonkwo stood by the pit. He asked Okagbue to come up and rest while he took a hand, but Okagbue said he was not tired yet. Akwefi went into her hut to cook yams. Her husband had brought out more yams than usual because the medicine man had to be fed. Azinma went with her and helped in preparing the vegetables. "There is too much green vegetable," she said. "Don't you see the pot is full of yams?" Akwefi asked. "And you know how leaves become smaller after cooking. "Yes," said Azimla. "That was why the snake lizard killed his mother." "Very true," said Akwefi. "He gave his mother 7 baskets of vegetables to cook, and in the end there were only 3, and so he killed her," said Azimla. "That is not the end of the story." "Oh," said Azimla, "I remember now. He brought another 7 baskets and cooked them himself, and there were again only 3, so he killed himself too." Outside the Obi, Okagbue and Okonkwo were digging the pit to find where Azimla had buried her Iiua. Neighbors sat around watching. The pit was now so deep that they no longer saw the digger. They only saw the red earth he threw up mounting higher and higher. Okonkwo's son Nuoye stood near the edge of the pit because he wanted to take in all that happened. Okagbue had again taken over the digging from Okonkwo. He worked as usual in silence. The neighbors and Okonkwo's wives were now talking. The children had lost interest and were playing. Suddenly, Okagbue sprang to the surface with the agility of a leopard. "It is very near now," he said. "I have felt it." There was immediate excitement, and those who were sitting jumped to their feet. "Call your wife and child," he said to Okonkwo. But Akwefi and Azimla had heard the noise and run out to see what it was. Okagbue went back into the pit, which was now surrounded by spectators. After a few more hoefuls of earth, he struck the Iiua. He raised it carefully with the hoe and threw it to the surface. Some women ran away in fear when it was thrown, but they soon returned and everyone was gazing at the rag from a reasonable distance. Okagbue emerged, and without saying a word or even looking at the spectators, he went to his goatskin bag, took out 2 leaves, and began to chew them. When he had swallowed them, he took up the rag with his left hand and began to untie it. And then the smooth, shiny pebble fell out. He picked it up. "Is this yours?" he asked Azimla. "Yes," she replied. All the women shouted with joy because Akwefi's troubles were at last ended. All this had happened more than a year ago, and Azimla had not been ill since. And then suddenly she had begun to shiver in the night. Akwefi brought her to the fireplace, spread her mat on the floor, and built a fire. But she had got worse and worse. As she knelt by her, feeling with her palm the wet burning forehead, she prayed 1,000 times. Although her husband's wives were saying that it was nothing more than Iba, she did not hear them. Okonkwo returned from the bush carrying on his left shoulder a large bundle of grasses and leaves, roots and barks of medicinal trees and shrubs. He went into Akwefi's hut, put down his load, and sat down. "Give me a pot," he said, "and leave the child alone." Akwefi went to bring the pot, and Okonkwo selected the best from his bundle, in their due proportions, and cut them up. He put them in the pot, and Akwefi poured in some water. "Is that enough?" she asked when she had poured in about half of the water in the bowl. "A little more." "I said a little! Are you deaf?" Okonkwo roared at her. She set the pot on the fire, and Okonkwo took up his machete to return to his obi. "You must watch the pot carefully," he said as he went, "and don't allow it to boil over. If it does, its power will be gone." He went away to his hut, and Akwefi began to tend the medicine pot, almost as if it were a sick child itself. Her eyes went constantly from Azimla to the boiling pot and back to Azimla. Okonkwo returned when he felt the medicine had cooked long enough. He looked it over and said it was done. "Bring me a low stool for Azimla," he said, "and a thick mat." He took down the pot from the fire and placed it in front of the stool. He then roused Azimla and placed her on the stool astride the steaming pot. The thick mat was thrown over both. Azimla struggled to escape from the choking and overpowering steam, but she was held down. She started to cry. So they have her leaning over this pot and all the steam coming up in her face, and then they throw this heavy mat over her to keep the steam there. And so of course she wants to get away because the steam is like making it hard to breathe, and it's probably hot and probably doesn't smell good, but it's helping her. When the mat was at last removed, she was drenched in perspiration. Akwefi mopped her with a piece of cloth, and she lay down on a dry mat and was soon asleep. So that's it for chapter 9. It lets you know a whole lot about Akwefi and her daughter and their relationship. And Okonkwo, he definitely cares for Azimla. She's definitely his favorite kid, and I think that that shows it. And he's pretty intelligent too. I mean, he knows what kind of medicines to get from the bush. So, they're an intelligent people, the Igbo. Next time we're going to get into chapter 10. And why did you not say so, you wicked daughter of Okaglogowela?